Hey y'all, it's Chimney. So I want to talk about how easy and insidious it is to be programmed by fear and remind you to stay vigilant, stay woke, literally, so that you don't find yourself unconsciously, plugged into the fear matrix and unconsciously recreating that fear. This came up for me when I was talking to one of my coaching clients, and I was just noticing the fact that I had moved from the United States to Mexico, and they had also recently left the United States. And I connected to this sense of fear I had that there was this kind of upcoming doom that was going to befall the United States. And I had just a clear wisdom and a clear knowing that wasn't even fully conscious that said, you need to get out of here. Like, it's not safe for you, get out, right? And when I think about some of the major things that have happened in our world and in certain countries, there were always people who sort of like read the tea leaves and were like, this is taking a turn. I'm gonna leave now. I'm gonna get out of here now before maybe I can't leave, right? And this is a really sort of scary thing to contemplate. And what I noticed about myself was when I was talking to my client about this, I had enough consciousness to know, hey, you're about to say something rooted in fear, and that means you are transmitting fear, right? Like, you're taking fear and you're putting it out in the world, and what you put out, you only, where your attention goes, energy flows, all that, right? So you're gonna be growing fear. So I had the consciousness to notice, but not enough to actually stop myself from doing it. And, this was something that I really did feel. I was trying not to feel it. I was trying to suppress it, but it was something that I was feeling. So I'm always glad when I get to express something that's on my spirit. And one thing I'm noticing is that there's certain behaviors that I will engage in that will cultivate a feeling of fear. And it takes true choice to not engage in those behaviors. And life is as simple as that. It is as simple as, am I walking and feeding and growing the things that bring me joy? Or am I allowing myself to cultivate this fear, right? And is it something that I'm doing consciously or not? And the other way that this was revealed to me was through this really, really well-made Apple TV show called Silo. So I recently joined Threads, and one thing I really appreciated about Threads is that it recommends a lot of TV shows to me that I otherwise wouldn't have watched. So I watched the Martha Stewart documentary on Netflix. It was great. And I also started watching Silo because I kept hearing about it, right? And I read the book a while ago, so I kind of knew high level what was going on. And what was interesting is I tried to watch it months ago, and then when you start watching a show, it lets you know the rating and why it's rated that way. And it mentioned violence in like the first episode. And I was like, okay, well, I'm not gonna intentionally consume violence. Like, I know that what you look at, what you give your attention to, is what you start attracting into your life. And I'm like, well, if I don't want violence, why would I watch violence, right? It just doesn't make sense. And then interestingly, enough time passed, and I was like, I guess I do want a little bit of violence, huh? And so I started watching this show. It's really, really compelling. It's really, really well made. And high level, it's about this authoritarian, oppressive, government regime state, oppressing and lying to the people in the population and the folks trying to get to the truth and, create their own destiny and all these different things, right? And what I thought was so interesting is that, with a really good show, you're in it, right? So literally your body is reacting as if it's real. And so there were times during the show where I would literally mute it because, audio plays a big role in like the immersion. So when things were getting too tense, I would literally mute the show. That way the soundtrack wasn't like activating my nervous system and I could just watch it. And then I also noticed there'd be other times when I would just be so in it that my heart would start beating faster. Like, I would get a genuine sense of like nervousness because I was so invested in what was going on the show. And I don't remember who I was watching and listening to. It was someone involved in like the neuroscience world. And he said that one thing he's so intentional about is not passively watching screens, because he realizes that it so effectively like hijacks your brain and like implants your subconscious with all of these ideas. Like, it's literally programming you, right? And I was like aware of this, but like, I gotta watch my shows, you know what I mean? I gotta watch my TV shows. And then after a night of like marathoning a few episodes, I literally paused and I went outside to my balcony and I just started crying because I really connected to this genuine sense of fear that this could happen, that this is happening in other parts of the world. And I just like processed that fear. And once I had moved that energy in me, I turned the show off. I didn't have that need to watch it anymore. So I think on some level, I used the show unconsciously as a tool to meet the part of me that hasn't processed what happened, you know, with the election in the United States. And I realized that if I were to keep watching it, all it would do would be to feed that. And something that I've noticed on people talk a lot about on Threads, but also that is being reflected in the like world and like the ratings, is that a lot of news programming has gone way, way, way down in viewership. Like a lot of people are just turning it off. They're like, nope, I'm done. They're just out and they're just like, I'm just gonna live my life. I'm gonna build my in real life community. I'm gonna just get back into my hobbies. Like people are just sort of tuning out. And I'm one of those people who I knew better than to watch the news anyway, but now I'm even more intentional about it. And yeah, I just want to encourage you, if you're on that same wavelength, just to be aware of what you're watching and if the subtleness, like the subtle message behind it is actually a message of fear. And I want to bring it back to The Eye of the Eye, From Which Nothing is Hidden by David Hawkins. And one of the things that he's really known for is creating this map of consciousness, and at the bottom are things like fear and guilt and anger and shame and all of these things. And something he says a lot in this book is that about 70% of the population, this was written back in 2001, so it's been a good 20 years, so hopefully that's increased a little bit, or decreased a little bit, but he said basically 70% of the population lives below the level of integrity. So just basic integrity, a lot of people don't even vibrate on that level. Like they think it's okay to lie and to cheat and steal, and they like violence and all these things. And when I would read this, there was a part of me that didn't want to believe it was true, because that's kind of overwhelming as a stat to consider that most people don't really vibrate with integrity. Like the majority of them, like that seems high. And of course it changes by different groups and subgroups and regions and all these things like that. But what I considered is that if most people are vibrating in a place of fear or anger or shame or guilt, they can't help but radiate that out. And if they're the ones who are creating media, they can't help but create media that reinforces fear and guilt and shame and anger and all these things below integrity, right? And it just made me realize that, oh, I have to be the one who's intentionally consuming content that supports the life I want to live, that is full of joy and compassion and kindness and love and all of these things. I can't sort of be unconscious and just hope that I'll kind of just be able to stay connected to that frequency, because the majority of people and the majority of what's created isn't actually going to be a vibrational match to me, and I'll find myself feeling worse at the end of watching it. So, you know, there's a chapter in this book that's, according to his rating system, one of the sort of has the highest frequency. And it starts by him saying, like, all spiritual truth can be boiled down to stay away from things that make your muscles go weak, you know, that don't have any life, that don't have any truth, and move towards things that, you know, make you feel strong, that fill you with life, that fill you with joy. It's just as simple as that. Like, you just choose the light and you keep moving towards it, and that's it. And it's just shockingly simple, and it's so simple that you're like, well, if that's obvious, why don't we all do it? And it's because sometimes the TV show is really, really good. So again, just want to encourage you to choose the light and to give yourself grace when you don't, because sometimes you got to know what happens. Are we going to ever get out of the silo, etc.? All right. Love y'all. Bye.